Japan's 4-month-old Democratic Party government of Yukio Hatoyama is having a bumpy ride, and one that's now caused confusion in financial markets. The latest upset is the sudden resignation of Finance Minister Hirohisa Fuji and his replacement by Hayato Kan, who launched into the job by saying he wanted the yen to weaken to spur exports. It did, but then both the Prime Minister and his Chief Cabinet Secretary appeared to reprimand Mr. Kan, saying ministers shouldn't speak out on exchange rates.
What you've had is a shift in personalities that's not very important. With that always comes some sort of disconnect, and the media is blowing out of proportion. Japan has very serious problems. They're not going to be solved by any individual, and they're not going to be compounded by any individual.
This is Colin Chapman at Stratfor, bringing you Agenda with George Friedman. The incoming Mr. Kan wants to stimulate the economy, restoring growth and ending chronic deflation. The world's second largest economy has been in a deep freeze. In the last decade, there have been almost no growth. In fact, output is only 16% higher than it was 20 years ago, when many in Congress were worried Japan would swamp the world. So is Japan destined for another lost decade?
I don't agree that the past 10 years in Japan was wasted. The Japanese prime interest is not in growing the economy, but in limiting unemployment. Japan is a society built around certain almost medieval principles where the corporation and the individual have obligations to each other. Therefore, for a good Japanese policymaker, the most important thing was not having corporations violate their obligations to individuals. And they achieved that, and they achieved that very well. The Japanese unemployment rate did not get out of hand. They also paid a price for that, and that price was limiting economic growth with the allocation of resources they did. From the standpoint of an American or a British economist or financial guy, I mean, this is a wasted generation. Not only 10 years, but going back to 1990. In fact, it is the Japanese solution to the Japanese problem, and the Japanese were quite satisfied with it.
So, what do they do?
We have had a basic social and economic structure in place since the end of World War II. The first phase of this has been rapid economic growth, very much like China today. The second was encountering the limits of growth and then managing the economy in order to mitigate the effects of low growth. The Japanese are now going to go to a new economic model. And that new economic model, I suspect, is going to be much tighter state controls. Much of the Japanese economy is actually controlled by bureaucrats, both in the ministries of finance and other places, and their collaborators in private industry. And much more tighter controls, more open controls over the market. This is not to say this is going to optimize the economy. But it's absolutely essential to understand that the Japanese don't intend to optimize the economy. Their primary concern is social stability. They're playing a totally different game from the American game, from the British game, and therefore, they will do what they have to do, and the rest of the world will say, my goodness, that's not a very good idea.
I'm Marla Dial with a look at the week ahead. Germany's foreign minister had al-Qaeda militants and Iran's nuclear program on his mind as he began a tour of the Middle East over the weekend. But South African President Jacob Zuma was to be focused on football and possibly a regional rivalry during his visit to Angola on Sunday. On Monday, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton meets with her Japanese counterpart in Hawaii to discuss relocation of a military base. Then she's off for talks in other parts of the strategically significant Pacific, Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, and Australia. Come midweek, the spotlight will be on the Caucasus, with Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Moscow and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Armenia. The future of the Nagorno-Karabakh region is on the agenda there. And energy investors will be paying heed to events in Nigeria, where lawmakers take up discussion on a proposal to restructure oil laws, and a federal court hears arguments on whether the country's ailing president should temporarily cede powers to the next in command. Finally, Malaysia's prime minister is slated to sign a memorandum of understanding on security cooperation with Saudi Arabia, and a free trade deal between Peru and China takes effect.